After this video, you'll never look at these actors the same way again, because you'll discover they're no longer themselves. One ripped out a tooth, cut his own face, and went without showering for weeks. Another showed up on set without reading the script, shaved his head, improvised almost everything, and spent weeks locked in the dark. But in the most extreme case, the actor completely lost his identity, and when the camera stopped rolling, it was already too late to come back. In Blue Valentine, Ryan Gosling and Michelle Williams didn't act a relationship, they lived one. Before shooting, director Derek Cianfrance made them live together for a month, like a real couple. They shared a home, cooked, argued, and raised the little girl playing their daughter. They recorded themselves with a home camera, improvising everyday moments to create real memories. When production started, those memories became their emotional raw material. The happy scenes grew out of that cohabitation. The breakup scene sprung from what had already deteriorated between them. Cianfrance isolated them from the crew and shot handheld, with no locked script. They didn't know what would happen day to day. They had only one instruction: feel everything for real. Between the two shoot blocks, Gosling gained weight, stopped sleeping, and shaved his head to reflect the character's wear and tear over the years. Michelle cried for real in every take. The fights felt so real the crew sometimes had to cut because of the tension. When it was over, both were completely drained. Michelle needed therapy, and even said, "It was like getting divorced without ever being married." Gosling admitted that for weeks, he kept feeling sadness and anger without knowing why. He said the character wouldn't leave, that he was still inside him. Blue Valentine wasn't just a film about the end of love. It was an emotional experience that tore them up from the inside. And when the camera turned off, the fictional relationship already felt more real than their own lives. For House of Gucci, Lady Gaga lived inside the character for almost a year. She spoke with an Italian accent, even offset, so much that people around her began to worry. There was no break. Gaga slept, ate, and breathed like Patrizia. She studied her interviews, her way of moving, looking, manipulating. She became obsessed with understanding what could drive a woman to order the murder of the man she loved. During the shoot, the line between actress and character blurred. Gaga began to feel the same rage, the same wound of abandonment that drove Reggiani. In several scenes, she cried uncontrollably, even after Ridley Scott yelled, "Cut!" Crew members say she sometimes stayed alone, murmuring lines from the script as if possessed. Months passed until the shoot ended, but she couldn't get out of the role. She said, "Patrizia never left. She lived inside me. I felt her shadow all the time." She had to isolate herself, step away from the press, and she confessed she needed psychological help to recover her identity. Lady Gaga had prepared for a role and ended up living inside the mind of a murderer. Her performance was praised, but she herself admitted she lost something in the process and that she was never the same again. Jared Leto is known for extreme immersion, but when he played the Joker, he embodied him as a diseased creature devouring everything around him. At first, he isolated himself from the cast. He didn't want to be seen as Jared, but as the Joker himself. During rehearsals, he whispered, laughed to himself, and sent macabre gifts to colleagues. A live rat to Margot Robbie, real bullets to Will Smith, and to the production team, a dead pig full of entrails. He said it was part of the method, but everyone started to feel uncomfortable. Leto stayed in character off camera. He moved like the Joker, spoke in that distorted voice, and demanded to be called Mr. J. He didn't mingle with anyone. He spent breaks alone in the dark of his trailer, listening to distorted laughter and recording audio notes to keep himself inside the chaos. Some crew members admitted it was impossible to tell when he was acting and when he wasn't. Leto later acknowledged that his process consumed him, that he went so deep into the Joker's mind, it was hard to come back. But the result wasn't what he expected. Most of his scenes were cut from the final edit, and audiences rejected him harshly. Years later, he admitted it was hard to get out of the character, that the Joker had stayed inside him for too long. Jared Leto learned what so many actors fear. If you cross the line between yourself and your character, you might not find your way back. Jim Morrison came back to life in 1991 through Val Kilmer's body. During The Doors, the line between the actor and the myth dissolved completely. Kilmer spent nearly a year studying every Morrison recording, every gesture, every silence. He listened to his interviews in his sleep, learned to imitate his voice, and convinced Oliver Stone to let him sing all the songs himself. The result was so perfect that in the studio, even the sound engineer couldn't tell which voice was Morrison's and which was Kilmer's. But obsession soon became possession. On set, Kilmer showed up drunk, recited poetry off script, and surrendered to bursts of rage and ecstasy no one could control. Sometimes he walked barefoot through the desert for hours before filming, searching for Jim's energy. He arrived with a distant gaze, speaking in a trance, as if he heard voices others couldn't. Stone encouraged him. He wanted real chaos, not performance. And he got it. The crew began to avoid him. They said they weren't filming with Val Kilmer, but with Jim Morrison's ghost. When shooting wrapped, Kilmer broke down. For months, he kept seeing Morrison's face in the mirror, hearing his voice in his dreams. He said Jim didn't leave. He just changed bodies. The Doors consecrated him as an actor, but it also destroyed him, because some roles aren't performed. They're endured, and Val Kilmer learned that resurrecting a dead idol can cost you your own soul. Now for the king, the most extreme actor. For Daniel Day-Lewis, acting was never pretending, but bleeding. And in Gangs of New York, that idea reached its most extreme point. During the shoot, he decided to truly become Bill the Butcher Cutting, a 19th century New York killer. He had real blades forged, shaved with them, and refused to wear a coat in the dead of winter because his character wouldn't have. The result? A pneumonia that nearly killed him. But when the crew begged him to go to the hospital, he refused medication because antibiotics didn't exist at the time. Martin Scorsese was fascinated and terrified. He said Day-Lewis didn't act. He lived inside a darkness no one else could bear. On set, he never broke character, not even between takes. He spoke with a period accent, treated the rest of the cast as enemies, and insisted on being called Butcher. Leonardo DiCaprio admitted there were moments he felt genuinely afraid of him, especially when Day-Lewis improvised fits of fury in the middle of a scene. His preparation was, as always, extreme. He spent months studying real butcher's techniques, dissecting animals and training with knives until his fingers were covered in calluses. He wore glass over his real eye to simulate a glass eye, and learned to tap it with a knife without blinking. He slept little, ate almost nothing, and wrote letters to his family signed as Bill Cutting. When filming ended, Day-Lewis didn't return immediately. He said Bill didn't want to leave. He spent weeks in isolation, unable to look at his reflection without feeling someone else staring back from inside. Scorsese later confessed he'd never seen anyone go that far. In every role, Daniel Day-Lewis left a piece of himself behind. Gangs of New York wasn't just a performance. It was an exorcism, one that left him empty, and perhaps a little closer to losing himself forever. In Kramer vs. Kramer, Dustin Hoffman didn't just play a father going through a divorce. He was one. During the shoot, he was in the middle of separating from his wife and the real custody battle for his daughters. He carried that anguish onto the set every day. What was meant to be a film about family breakdown became a painful, real release. Hoffman chose to act without filters. He yelled, improvised, broke props, and at times crossed lines. In one scene, he slapped Meryl Streep for real without warning to provoke an authentic reaction. She cried for real, and the crew was in shock, something that today would be intolerable. In another take, he smashed a glass in front of her, making the fear on her face completely real. Years later, Streep said Hoffman was going through something deeply personal, and he was channeling it through the character. For Hoffman, the shoot was catharsis, therapy without restraints. He spent hours alone on set, running scenes, crying off camera. Cian-France said of Blue Valentine that he wanted his actors to truly feel, but Hoffman had done it decades earlier without being asked. When the film ended, he won the Oscar, but he also lost something. He said Kramer versus. Kramer left him with a strange emptiness, as if he'd left everything that remained of his own marriage inside that story. Sometimes art heals. Other times, it just opens the wound a little wider. Shia LaBeouf lived his role in Fury like a real war. From day one, he decided that if he was going to play a soldier, he had to become one. During training with the US Army, he stopped showering for the entire shoot, over a month, to smell and feel like soldiers at the front. He used a blade to rip out a real tooth to achieve the deteriorated look he wanted and asked a doctor to stitch him up without anesthesia. But that was just the beginning. While the other actors slept in hotels, he lived in a tent on set, in rain and mud. He slept in uniform with his rifle by his side. He cut his face with a razor every morning before filming, so the wounds on screen would be authentic. Director David Ayer encouraged him to keep that intensity, and the atmosphere on set became unbearable. LaBouffe refused to speak out of character and argued constantly with the others, who began to avoid him. Brad Pitt later said Shia wasn't playing a role. He was in a war. They were just filming it. During the hardest scenes, he went into trances. In one of them, he cried and trembled so violently that the crew fell silent. They didn't know whether to keep rolling or help him. When it was over, LaBouffe collapsed. He said he'd lost any sense of who he was. He spent weeks alone, writing journals about the character's trauma, unable to sleep without nightmares. Years later, he confessed that Fury had taken him to the darkest place of his life. Because sometimes, when you give yourself completely to another man's pain, you can't find your way back to your own. When Francis Ford Coppola hired Marlon Brando for Apocalypse Now, he expected a god of cinema. What he got was an unpredictable monster, devoured by his own myth. Brando arrived on set overweight, bald, weeks late, and without having read the script. He'd been paid $3 million up front, but refused to shoot. Desperate, Coppola locked himself away with him for days to read Conrad's Heart of Darkness together. Out of that came Colonel Kurtz, a man who had lost his mind. Just like Brando. Brando improvised almost everything. The scenes had no script. Coppola let him speak in half light, rolling the camera in shadows to hide his bloated body. During takes, he riffed about war, morality, and madness, blending Conrad's text with his own obsessions. Sometimes he demanded that no one look directly at him. Other times, he insisted on endless repetitions until his delirium turned into truth. The shoot was a nightmare. Typhoons, malaria, hospitalized actors, Coppola with anxiety attacks, and Brando slipping further away each day. He spent hours monologuing in complete darkness, his voice booming through the jungle like a funeral mass. There was something hypnotic, almost demonic about his presence. No one knew whether the man speaking was Brando or Kurtz. When the film was finished, Brando cut all contact. He said he couldn't watch the footage, that what they captured wasn't a performance. It was his mind decomposing in front of the camera. Apocalypse Now became a masterpiece, but at a terrible price. The mental health of everyone who made it. And Brando, the greatest actor of his time, discovered that the horror Kurtz spoke of already lived inside him. Michael Fassbender didn't act hunger. He lived it. To become Bobby Sands, the IRA prisoner who began a hunger strike to the death, Fassbender pushed his body to the absolute limit. For months, he followed a controlled diet that reduced him to a specter. He lost over 20 kilos, living on little more than nuts, sardines, and berries. His body wasted away day by day, and McQueen, his director, filmed that deterioration with clinical precision. The shoot was an almost religious experience. The first half of Hunger shows physical horror. Naked bodies smeared with excrement, police brutality, isolation. Fassbender spent hours motionless, enduring cold, real hunger and filth. But the most extreme part was still to come. The central sequence, a 17-minute unbroken conversation, was filmed after weeks of fasting. Fassbender was so weak he could barely stand. His breathing was real, his skin ashen, his gaze hollow. There was no makeup, just the body of a man extinguishing himself in front of the camera. After that scene, he continued losing weight down to skin and bone. In the final days, he couldn't sleep or concentrate. He suffered dizziness and saw lights and hallucinatory figures. But he insisted on finishing. He said he had to do it out of respect for Bobby Sands and for those who died believing in something. When filming wrapped, he needed weeks to eat normally again. His body recovered, but not his mind. Fassbender confessed that hunger changed him forever, that he never looked at food or pain the same way again. Because on that shoot, Michael Fassbender walked the road to death. In 1999, Jim Carrey ceased to exist. During Man on the Moon, he stopped being an actor playing Andy Kaufman and became him completely. Literally. From day one, he asked that no one call him Jim, not even director Milos Forman. He responded only to Andy, or Tony Clifton, the comedian's foul-mouthed, destructive alter ego. Carrey lived in character 24/7. He arrived on set in disguise, insulted the crew, disappeared without warning. When he did, Tony took over. He showed up drunk, trashed sets, and demanded they film scenes that weren't in the script. Forman was both fascinated and terrified. He said, "It was like having Andy Kaufman alive, but not knowing if we'd make it out sane." Carrey obsessively studied every interview, every gesture, every pause. He isolated himself from his family, shut himself in his trailer, speaking only in Andy's voice. At one point, he staged a spiritual encounter. He went to the sea, shouted for a sign, and swore Kaufman's spirit had entered him. From that moment, he said he wasn't acting. He was channeling. Over the months of shooting, he suffered dissociative episodes, forgetting who he really was. The crew filmed every second, but the footage was locked away for nearly 20 years because it was too disturbing. When the documentary Jim and Andy revealed it, Cary himself confessed, "Andy possessed me. When it ended, I didn't know who I was. And for a long time, I didn't want to know." After Man on the Moon, Cary fell into a brutal existential crisis. He stepped away for a while, disappeared from movies, and spoke publicly about the loss of ego and identity. He said Jim Carrey was just a character who no longer existed, because on that shoot, he didn't play Andy Kaufman. He brought him back, and when Andy left, Jim didn't return. If you made it to the end, drop a like and subscribe. Here we don't just talk about cinema, we talk about what cinema does to the soul. Tell me in the comments which of these transformations hit you the hardest. I want to read you. And if you want to keep exploring this deeper side of film, follow me on Instagram and on Letterboxd, where I share what you won't see on YouTube.